Hi everyone, Niamh here. On this episode of the Payoff podcast, Kate and I catch up with medtech entrepreneur and all-round badass Hayley Saddington of Halo Medical. Hayley took a tragic and life-altering event that took place in her university years and used it as the fuel to become fearless on her quest to help others. Hayley had Kate and I girl crushing within about 5 minutes of meeting her, and we're sure you'll feel the same way. Hope you enjoy listening to this one as much as we enjoyed making it.
Thank you for joining us today, Hayley. We're absolutely thrilled to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
So we were talking to our colleague Georgie, who's a friend of yours, and she told us a bit about your story, and we just really wanted to hear more.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, and lovely for Georgie to mention.
So maybe we could start off with you just telling us a bit about yourself and your journey and background.
Absolutely. So I am a medtech entrepreneur. I look at devices that are old and things we can innovate to make better to use on people. So the whole aim is to help people. That's the core of what we do as a company. We're about 9 years down the track now, but I'm still very much connected with the startup, the scale-up journey. The war story is sort of contributing to that. But medtech company, looking at a new artificial intelligence device for orthopedics. That's our next play, and really starting to help more developing countries as well to change healthcare equality. So give people more access to top level care through devices, and particularly for those people who perhaps live super far away from hospitals, for example, or can't afford it. They're our aims.
Was it the desire to solve a problem that you spotted and that was affecting your industry that drove you, or was it that you really wanted to be in tech? Like, which sort of came first?
I love that question. So it's kind of in 3 parts. So I was heavily driven to help people from personal experience, and that was related to being young, about 10 years old. My dad had this farming accident, and I was out in the field with him that day, and he had caught his arm in a piece of machinery. It's a serious injury. I'm 10 years old, driving him across the paddock. Royal Flying Doctors are waiting the other end for us. And then from that experience, to gain his rehabilitation, we had to travel 500 kilometres each way, which is hugely disruptive to the family and the farm life. So from an early age, I've had that drive to help people. And then I kind of moved into, I guess at university, I moved into more healthcare science-based degrees, where I started to see the tools that we're using on these people who are like my dad, who I really wanted to help and make sure they had the top accuracy.
That's amazing that you took that experience and then put it back into creating a career.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting what shapes you and what direction you take. And that's something that really stuck with me. And I've always loved working with people. And then it just kind of took a different turn into healthcare. And I think then in terms of, you look at what enables entrepreneurs to start an idea. So you've got an idea in your head, but often you need a bit of capital to do it and make it sort of an actual product as well. I then had an experience where my partner at the time, I was 4th year physiotherapy, so had already had this idea about my first product, but didn't know how I was going to get there. But my partner at the time actually had passed away in this horrific overseas accident actually. And that again was a pivot point for me. So that enabled an inheritance. So that's quite unusual for an entrepreneur and a student as well, to then enable, our first startup, Cap, to come into the company. And it also enabled this incredible drive and motivation every morning to make sure I did the right thing with that money that I'd inherited. And it was a small amount, but it was enough to start our engineering and R&D with the product.
Wow, well, congratulations on taking tragedy and turning it into such an amazing product and business.
Oh, thank you. Huge driver. And I think you can go 2 ways. You can sink, or you can swim. It took me about a year to, rise to the top in that. And, it set me up. That particular event in life has set me up for anything. So I feel very confident whatever comes my way, I've can handle. So it's a great positive out of a life event.
Fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's a really inspiring story. And you mentioned that you loved working with people anyway, and you did physiotherapy at uni. And so with that inheritance that you received, you could have started your own physiotherapy company. So what made you decide to innovate and take that risk?
Great question as well. So I think I've always, and maybe it comes from being a farm kid and having that lateral thought process always at play. So, looking at how we can solve a problem, with the things we have around us. So that's being a very natural characteristic of mine. I found the physiotherapy side of things more structured and perhaps a bit too structured for me. And so I ended up, I left before my exams and went straight into the business world. So that unstructured entrepreneur side really, really resonated with me. And I'd had that idea with the first product. And I just decided to go for it. And you're so right. I could have just taken a safe route. Mum and Dad's advice was to maybe put that inheritance into a house, start that life. But it just never resonated with me. And I've always had this bigger sense to do something bigger. And then that's where it started.
That's awesome.
Great. So on that, do you have any advice for anybody out there who might have that sort of driver to start a business and, how they can sort of take that idea and move forward with it?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest piece of advice is really understanding why you're doing what you're doing. And you hear about the why and Simon Sinek, you hear about these, the podcasts who really drive home the why. And it's still very, very important. Understanding your market. Do you actually have a solution that's going to help people? Or are you kind of just creating something that's going to fit a small group of people and perhaps people around you? So that first initial, it's almost like a bit of market research outside of your friends and your family who are going to give you great feedback, positive feedback. You need to go beyond that and start to have a think around exploring your true market where you're going to get that sense of validation back to take that next step. So you've got the idea, take it to a group of people, start to get the feedback, and then see where it goes from there.
Awesome.
That's really interesting, that approach. With the idea that you had, did you try a few things and fail, or was that something that you just initially thought of and stuck with?
I remember in terms of the product development, it was super clunky. So we definitely tried a couple of concepts out, and what worked was the digital version we have today. But that was really, I'm kind of, and I don't know if it's just the in-ground thing. I was, since I've been 2 years old, I was very much like, I'm sleeping in a big bed, and that would just happen. I'm very much, if I know a decision, there's this inner core alignment, I'm like, that's what we're doing. And that's what we kind of run with. Not to say that I'm rigid in their design and how it might look and end up. You've got to be flexible as an entrepreneur to make sure you're taking feedback around you. But the core idea of the goniometer/inclinometer, which is Halo, big words for this thing, measuring tool we have, was always the same.
That's awesome. I think that mindset of like taking an idea and sticking with it and just going for it is probably one of the reasons why we've been so successful.
Thank you.
I know with me, I sometimes have an idea. I'm like, oh, but maybe not. And you have to think about it. But if you just stick with your gut.
Yeah, it is. And stick with your gut. That really knowing your instinct, following your instinct. And I think it's incredibly powerful to access that. And I think my life events sort of allowed me to access that quite early, to know who I am and understand my mission, if you like. But I guess for those who don't have confidence in their intuition, there's so many things you can do that, really can let you access that for, like meditation, for example, in whatever way that resonates with you. So
yeah, and on that note of confidence, in my experience as a female, and I'm not saying that it's just females that experience this, but there is I mean, there's a lot of research in the confidence gap between females and males in business. I often lack that self-confidence, and sometimes I think it holds me back. Have you ever had
same
that?
For me as well.
I think it is very common. Have you had that self-doubt before, and how have you overcome it?
Always. I think it is you're rightful to say it's a female thing. We often don't think we're going to get something until we've got it. And whereas males clearly are more like, I'm going to get it. They already see themselves in that role if it's a new job, for example. For females and even with all the personal development work I've done, I still today use tools when I'm perhaps getting up on a panel or a stage to access that sort of confidence and come across in a really congruent way. And they're just tiny little techniques that I've learned along the way. So absolutely, and every business founder that's female I know is in the same boat. So it's really, really common. And I think there's just a lot of little tools we can use to change that.
For sure. I think actually I even have a bit of anxiety about, like public speaking, and even the podcasts at first made me a bit nervous, but now just throwing yourself in there and doing it, you get such a buzz after it that I think you kind of want to go back and do more as well.
So Hayley, you've talked a lot, we've kind of chatted a lot about your success. I would be really interested to know how you dealt with the inevitable sort of failures that came up while you were sort of innovating and creating this new product and business.
So many failures, and it's a lot of learnings. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is to once you've failed in an area, just to not go back there. So to really take the lessons out of it and to move forward and carry them into your practice. I think one of the biggest failures is spending money when we didn't need to spend money and spending money with the wrong people. So identifying who you should be working with is really hard, especially when you're green and you're a new innovator or entrepreneur. And you've got to try and identify maybe a consultant you've got to work with, or an engineering team if you're in the tech space. It's very, very difficult to do that. And I think in particular it can be tricky in Australia because we don't have a lot of those people we can kind of work with. And then so people tend to want to outsource, maybe just to save cash. And then, again, you're in that same bucket of, am I working with the right people? And for me, one of the first engineer groups we worked with, great guys, and I was very green to the process. They didn't have the capacity to build what we needed, and I didn't have the capacity to know what we needed. So we went along this journey, and around $150,000 later, we weren't where we needed to be. So we had to then uproot and then take our product to another engineer, spend more money to get it. But I had learned what questions to ask. Did they have the capacity to do what we needed to do as a product going forward? And that served us really well. You can't not have failures in a business, and you can't be scared of them. They're going to happen because you can't know it all. And especially, otherwise it becomes a barrier to actually starting. You've just got to start.
And that experience you've had starting a business, kind of that whole process, I think you've taken that to some innovation programs, and you're mentoring people in some accelerator programs and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with founders at UNSW and also Tech Ready Women. I'm on the board of these two amazing programs. And why I joined to mentor and help out is because I didn't have that when I first started out. So the more of these programs, accelerators or incubators or mentor-based programs we can have, the better. Just to streamline, to stop our entrepreneurs making mistakes, just to be in the room to tell them it's okay. All of the stuff I would have loved to have at the start.
Yeah.
But so I fully believe in those kind of give back mentor situations where we can really help out.
And from the experience of these programs from beginning to end, what are the changes you usually see from the contendants?
What we're seeing is they come in with an idea and a product that's often one thing and they completely pivot to another product, which is kind of along the same lines, but it's more aligned with what the market actually needs. So it's so transformational over a 10 or 12 week period. We're seeing these ideas be what they should be and be market ready. So it's just the power of talking through and understanding what my product is, who my customer is, and getting to a point where you can put that down on, a solid piece of paper in terms of a roadmap forward.
I've got a bit of a curveball question for you. So I'm a total podcast nerd. So I followed the story of Elizabeth Holmes really closely, who was the dropout. For anyone who doesn't know the story of Theranos, it was a medical device company started by a Stanford dropout who it was basically pretty much a fraud, and the device never worked, and the story sort of blew up and became this huge scandal. Have you seen any repercussions in your space from the Theranos story in Australia?
It's an incredible story of how far she got in the medical world, where there's so many loops to go through, FDA regulations, etc. To get a product out, and this is the way it should be, because this is something that it's affecting people and our lives. So it's got to be highly regulated. So the fact that she got so far, I think she was listed in Forbes as the first billionaire female.
Yeah, I think she was on the cover of Forbes.
So how did this happen? How did this happen? And it's down to she is an incredible person. She's obviously able to convey and sell their vision so strongly that that's how she got where she was. And perhaps she had a belief that what she was doing could
true. Eventually get there. And I do think that's true, actually. If you listen to the podcast, I think that she not that this excuses in any way the complete negligence, but I do think that she really believed that, I'll just keep fudging this until it works, which obviously in the tech space, people do that all the time, but you can't do that in the medical device space. Like,
you can't.
It's not going to work.
No, absolutely. It's quite a unique story. I don't see this happening much because the medical side is so regulated if you're going into med tech or health care. And I love that it's regulated. It makes it a very hard industry to innovate in, but it's a very process industry. So it's very, very rare that you hear about these scenarios. And I don't think it's impacted, other than it's been a great story for people to talk about and learn from and examine a little bit.
Yeah, and probably did blow up because it is that really unusual case, the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, I agree.
We did a bit of research on you before you came in, just a little bit, and saw that you were on Shark Tank and saw your pitch, which I thought was amazing. And I bet you've given that pitch over and over again, and you've probably sat through quite a lot of pitches as well from the Accelerator programme. So what do you think makes a good pitch or a standout pitch?
A standout pitch is one that the founder is able to really convey their idea and their mission with certainty. And I think that comes from most powerfully the founder themselves, because they're, coming from ground up. So the founder actually pitching, I think, makes a really good start. And then there's the 5 basics. I remember being on Shark Tank and even watching back at some of the pitches, and there's like 5 things you need to know, and financials, just the basics is one of them. And I could see often people and entrepreneurs and people starting out fear the financials, like what is profit, who talks about revenue, and just knowing the interchangeable terms and learning that basic language set really sets you up for a good pitch, because as an investor or a partner, you want to know when your return on investment's coming back.
So I know that you were offered a sum of money, and what was the outcome of Shark Tank, and how did it impact Halo?
It was a great advert. We didn't know who the investors were going to be. As soon as I walked through, I saw Naomi Simpson and, of course, Janine Ellis as well. And I'm in the Telstra Businesswomen alumni with them both. And a bit of a surprise to sort of see them, knowing they're not really in my area of investment. But anyway, Naomi and Andrew Banks came on for a joint deal on the show. So that didn't go through in terms of the due diligence at the end. So we didn't get investment from them. But the program really served as a top-notch advert, which converted into a new distributor for us.
For the benefit of all the listeners, Hayley's expecting a baby.
Yes.
And I just wanted to know, is this your first?
Yes.
Yeah.
First.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And from like stuff that you've learned from starting your own business, will you take any of that to motherhood?
Yes, probably scheduling and planning. It's such a great question. I have 2 gorgeous stepkids as well, actually. So we'll have 3 busy personalities in the house, and a husband who has a high level career. So we're highly scheduled. And then we almost schedule our, rest and relaxation days as well. So that's something I've taken from the business world and applied to the family, because that sense of having it all, I do believe you can have it, but you've got to look after everyone's needs who are around you. And that's knowing the needs and planning them in. So it's no different to a team. That's our little family.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do some outsourcing as well from some time or another.
It's so true. Great concept. We are outsourcing some help because we don't have family here in Sydney. So to bring in the extra help we need around the house to do what we do best is essential.
Yeah,
same as a business.
It's been absolutely fantastic to have you on the podcast. You are by far one of my favorite guests that we've had on. Your story is thoroughly inspirational, and the little tidbits of information you gave over the course of the interview have just been beautiful. So thank you so much for making the time to join us today and share your story with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. I think it's so important what you're doing in terms of just getting these stories and unlocking it for other people to start their own journeys too. Thank you.
This is Niamh.
And this is Kate. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, why don't you share it with a friend?
And if you really liked it, subscribe and give us a rating.
If you want to find out more about KeyPay, go to keypay.com.
See you next time.